Hey, I'm Lukas. In this video, we're going to take a look at how you can update containers that are running on Sliplane. For this example, I have a version of N8N installed and running on Sliplane right here, and I can access it through the public domain that I get issued in Sliplane in the platform. I will click on the public domain in order to be redirected to the application. And then right here on the left side in this little help section, I will find about N8N. And if I click on it, we can see we are running version 1.110.0. So how can we update this? I will jump back into the Sliplane platform, and if we scroll down a little bit, we can find this registry config, and we can find an image URL for the container that is currently deployed. As you can see, this points to docker.io/n8nao/n8n colon 1.110.0. And this right here at the back of this string is the version that we are currently running. In order to update this, you can simply get rid of this tag at the end of the image URL, and then you can choose a new version from the list. For example, if we want to upgrade to 1.116.2, I will just select 1.116.2 from the list, and then I click on Save in order to deploy a new version. That being said, it can be a little bit dangerous to just update the version right here and to click save in order to start a redeploy. Why? Because these changes, they can contain bugs or breaking changes that will break your application. So one thing to always look out for is breaking changes. So how can you find out about breaking changes? Now, the first thing that we have to know is a breaking change by definition usually occurs if we change the version from a 1.116.2 to a 2.116.2, for example. So if the first number right here changes, this is usually the case if the changes contain a breaking change, which means something right here, for example, in the configuration changes, we don't use this webhook URL anymore, or we use a different environment variable that is now required. And stuff like this usually happens in a major version jump. So if we're jumping from 1.116 to 2.116, for example, this contains a breaking change. But sometimes, even though we are not doing a major version jump, for example, if we jump from 1.116.2 to 2.3, for example, this version doesn't even exist, but 2.4 or whatever, even these minor version changes can contain bugs that are there unintentionally, and they can still break your application. So one thing that makes a lot of sense is before upgrading, you want to test if the new version is running. So what you can do is, I will jump back, I will discard all of the changes that I made here, and then you can deploy a copy of your application. I will choose the same server. I will click on the N8N application. And then, for example, if we want to make a jump from 1.116 to 1.117, for example, I will choose this one, 1.117.3. And then what is also important is we will add a new volume right here. So I will create a new volume 2, for example, click on add volume. I will use the same path that this volume is mounted to, get rid of the old volume. And then I click save changes and click on deploy. And now we're deploying a completely new N8N instance with the same configuration as our previous instance, just in order to make sure that nothing breaks. If we click on it and scroll down a little bit, we are hooked up with a new public domain that we can use in order to access this N8N version 1.117.3. And if you remember, we created a new volume for this, and this step is important because we don't want that new version to modify our existing data for testing purposes. So I will click on this new instance. It seems to be working right here. So we know we don't necessarily need to change something with the configuration that we added in our previous version, and it is less likely that this update will break anything. And before we will do this jump right here in our original application, I can just go to 1.117.3 or something, 1.117.3, and if I click on save, I will deploy the new version. But one thing that makes a ton of sense is to go to volumes first, then select the volume, and then we will create a backup of our volume first, because as I mentioned, we never know if we will introduce any breaking changes that might be unintentional. It could be a bug that corrupts all of the data. So it's better to wait for this backup to finish. It's currently in progress, and it's going to take a few minutes for this backup to finish. What number should you choose? If we go to GitHub N8N. Now, most of the time, these open source applications like N8N, they are published on GitHub. And if we scroll down a little bit further, we can find this N8N repository where the source code for our application lives. And right here on the right side, we have this releases section. And if I click on the releases, we can find a list of all kinds of different versions. And we can see the latest stable version, it is tagged with this little green latest tag, is 1.117.3. So it makes sense to use 1.117.3 when we update our application. You could also even use a newer version. For example, they published 1.119.0, but it is tagged as a pre-release, which means it is not fully tested. It is just for you. If you want to be testing out the latest features, you could also upgrade to 1.119.0, for example. And if you take a look at these releases right here, what comes with these releases is a big list of features and bug fixes that are introduced in this new version. For example, version 1.119.0, you have a bunch of different bug fixes and a bunch of new features that you can use in this new version. If we go back to our application, another thing that you could do is swap out this version right here and use the latest tag. And then I can select the latest tag, and this will automatically install the latest version whenever we redeploy our application. So if we click on save right now, it will start a new deploy in the background. And whenever, for example, you redeploy your application right here manually, it will fetch the latest version of N8N, which is currently tagged 1.117.3. So this is called a fluid tag because, as mentioned, it is not always fixed. In a production setting, it does not make sense to use this tag, to be honest, because as I mentioned earlier, if there is a version jump from 1 to 2, for example, it can contain breaking changes. So you can unintentionally deploy a version of N8N that is not working. So it usually makes sense to pin the version to a specific version, and before an upgrade, quickly spin up a test container, do a backup, and verify that everything is working. Alright, so that's basically all you need to know on how you can update your applications on Sliplane. If you did like the video, give it a thumbs up, comment, like, and subscribe, and I see you next time.